Hey everyone, welcome to the first big long video lesson that you will have done for this class, which is the 8 steps in photo restoration. So if you haven't already looked through this slide presentation, you might want to find it in Google Classroom. More than likely I will have already presented it to you in class. But with this unit, we're learning the basic image adjustment commands in Photoshop. We're doing that for 2 reasons in the beginning of the semester. Number one, because you really need to understand these commands because you kind of build on these. They're your bread and butter. There's stuff you're going to be using a lot throughout the entire semester. So we put that first. Second of all, it's good to do at the beginning so you understand what the original intention of Photoshop was, which was to edit photos, digital photos. And so although this might not be the most creative unit, it is probably the most beneficial and the most historically accurate as to how Photoshop was used, at least in the beginning. So like I said, in this lesson we're going to go over the 8 steps with one caveat. We're actually going to skip step number 4 in this video, which is repair flaws in scans. We're going to do that in a second video that you'll be doing after this one, but we will be going through the other 7 steps. And when you go through and restore your images, you're going to want to make sure you refer back to this slide so you're doing them in order, and as well as your notes that you'll be taking along with me today. So let's go ahead and open up Photoshop and get started. We're going to go to File, Open. We're going to go to Courses, Art, Computer Graphic Lessons, Photoshop Lessons. We're going to scroll down. There is a folder in here called Photo Restoration. I want you to open up the 02 End and the 02 Start file. Okay, so if I pull these down side by side, you're going to see here what we're going to basically be doing. So in these 7 steps, you're going to learn how to crop and straighten. You're going to learn how to fix the tonal imbalances, which are lights and darks. You're going to learn how to fix color casts, which is color imbalances. You're going to learn how to tweak specific tones and colors in just specific areas instead of the whole thing. And you're going to learn a couple other steps in there as well. Okay, so I'm going to keep referring back to that slide. You don't need to during this video lesson, but make sure you do know where it is. If you want, you can go ahead and leave the end file open. It's kind of nice to see how close you get to what is the end in here, see how good you are, but you don't have to. With your start file, let's go to File, Save As. Remember, we're going to save this in your clouds under Photoshop Lessons, and we're going to give it your first name, and then we're going to call this, let's call it Lesson 2A. So put your name, Lesson 2A, and then click Save. Okay, then we're off and running. So photo restoration is all about minor tweaks and changes because it's really easy to make it look fake very quickly. So like I said, it's not the most interesting thing, but it is good to know. You really need to know these steps. Okay, so remember, go slow because you can make it look really fake really fast. All right, so if I look back at my slide presentation, if I look at number 1, duplicate the original image. Well, we just did that. This is a good suggestion because you don't ever want to work on your master file because, like I said, it's really easy in photo restoration to kind of mess it up to the point like you can't undo your changes. You need to start from scratch again. So always saying a duplicate image copy is the best thing, and because I have the master file, you automatically are doing that. When you're doing your project for this later on, which you'll be doing later, you want to make sure that you are not opening up your original file in Photoshop. Again, you're opening up the original file, but then save it under something different so that you have a copy saved. Okay, so we've already done step number 1. Step number 2 is to check the scan quality. I show you this just so that you have an idea of what they need to be set at, so when you're going to be printing these or if they're going to the internet. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go back to Photoshop. And with our image, we're going to go up to Image, Image Size. And this dialog box should pop up. Now, you really shouldn't change a resolution. So resolution is captured when your device, whether it be a camera, smartphone, or if it's an actual camera, it takes the photo at a specific resolution. Typically, if you're taking the photo for social media or for the internet, you're going to set your resolution at 72 or 96, and most of your smartphones, that's what they're set at, and people don't realize. That's why if you plan on printing out your photos, cell phone pictures aren't great because they take it at a lower resolution that's meant for uploading to the internet. if you're printing out your photos, you want to make sure your resolution is somewhere between 200 and 300. Now, I could artificially change this. I could bump this up. I could highlight it, and I could type in 300. Yes, so technically I'm making it a higher resolution. But the way resolution works is it has to do with pixels, and hopefully you've already gone through this in class. You'll know that although you can add in new pixels, it's just going to add in duplicates of what's already there, so it's still going to pixelate when you print it. So the quality isn't going to be any better. Okay, so I just tell people, just check it. One reason you also might want to check it is because if your computer is running really, really slowly, check your image size because it might be much larger than you need. So if you should never need a resolution over 300. And if your resolution is high, your print size doesn't need to be huge. So if you have a resolution of like say 600 and you have dimensions that are like 16 by 20 inches, that is a monster file that could really slow your computer down. So that's an interesting to check. So I'm going to go back and do that again. I'm just showing you, I'm going to image size. But you don't need to fix anything, just click cancel. I want to show you where that is. All right, so let's check back to our slide. So we've duplicated it, we've checked our resolution, we're on to step 3, which is crop and straighten. So let's go back to our image, and we're going to use the crop tool. It's over here on the left-hand side, looks like 2 overlapping right angles. To get the crop started, you simply have to click in the document, and you're going to get a grid line. From here, you're going to want to start by dragging one of the corners to start the crop. Obviously, we're cropping out too much, so I'm just kind of getting it the about appropriate size I need to. And then to rotate it, you need to let your cursor hover outside into the gray space that's going to get cut off, and you click and drag, and that's how you rotate. And you can continue moving your margins out. I want you to crop it so that there's no white space available. And then to apply the crop, you can do one of two things. You can either hit the check mark button at the top, or you can simply hit the enter key. If what you're doing you don't like and you need to start over, you've got it really messed up, just hit that close up at the top and then try it again. All right, so we're dragging in the size, we're rotating it, we're moving it around in there. You can crop it to where you think it looks best and go ahead and apply that. Stop the video and do that now. All right, what's our next step? So we just did step number 3. As I said, step number 4, we're going to skip. You guys are going to love that one, by the way. And we're going to go to 5, which is adjust the overall contrast and tonal range. And I've even put in here what that means is just your levels or brightness or contrast. It has to do with your darks and lights. So think of it in terms of whites and blacks. Okay, how much of those whites and blacks are in your colors. So if we go back to Photoshop, I'm going to show you several ways to do this. The best and easiest way for your tonal and your color corrections are to use the auto commands. I'm going to show you the auto commands. I'm also going to show you the manual commands. The reason being is because the auto doesn't always work. So the way I relate this is for students is to cars. Some of us know how to drive a manual stick transmission and some of us don't. Actually, most of us probably don't. But those of you guys who know how to use a stick shift in a car, you know that you have a lot more control. All right, but it's just harder to do. It's the same thing in Photoshop. The auto commands most of the time does a fairly decent job. It does it for you, but it doesn't always work. So you do need to know the manual way. Don't worry, it's not as hard as learning a stick shift for a car. All right, so let's go ahead and do this first. Let's go up to image, and then once you go down here, you're going to see that you have 3 auto commands. You've got auto tone, auto contrast, which we're not going to talk about, and then auto color. Auto tone is going to let the computer try to fix the level and balances on its own. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go to image, auto tone, and you'll see it brightens it up. Okay, so stop the video, try that now. All right, now that you did that, we're going to undo it. How do you undo that last step? Right, Control Z. So let's Control Z that, stop the video, and do that. All right, so now we're back to where it's kind of darker. So let's say that the computer didn't do a very good job and it's either too dark or too light. I'm going to show you how to manually correct that. So we're going to go to image, but we're going to go to adjustments. All of your manual color and value adjustments are under the adjustments command, and your tonal ones are up at the top. It's these 4 here. And we're going to use 3 of these, not all of them. We're going to use brightness and contrast, we're going to use levels, and I'm going to show you briefly exposure. we're not going to get into curves. It's a little too complicated. But let's start with the one that I like the best, which is levels. So stop the video, go to image adjustment levels until you get this box that pops up. All right, great. The first thing you should know is that with all these image adjustment commands, you want to make sure your preview option is checked because that's going to show you in real time the changes to the image as you make them, okay? So in levels, it has a histogram, it has a little mountain range, and it tells you where those values are. So if this is my blacks, these are my grays, and these are my whites, I can see I don't have very many whites or light colors. I don't have very many darks. I have a lot of dark grays and a lot of light grays. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to get that mountain range to kind of level out. So you've got some whites, you've got some lights, mid-tones, some darks, and some blacks, okay? The way you do that is you drag those sliders to even it out more. So you're going to take the white and you're going to drag it till it gets to about the start of that mountain range, and you're going to take the black and you're going to drag that in. You can also move the gray either to the right or to the left. And again, what I do before I click OK is I hit that preview on and off. So this is before my changes, this is after, before, after, before, after. I'm just looking to see am I making it better or worse. So stop the video and try that now. Okay, we're going to click cancel to this. If you applied it, do your Control Z because I want to show you another option. We're going to go to image adjustments. Instead of going to levels, I'm going to show you brightness and contrast. Brightness and contrast pretty much does the same thing, but instead of giving you the most control with your blacks, whites, and grays, it's kind of going to do it all together for you. So obviously your brightness is going to overall make everything brighter. Your contrast is going to push your darks darker and your whites whiter. So you can kind of play around with that. Again, make sure your previews option is checked. So stop the video and kind of play around with that without applying the changes. Okay, let's click cancel or edit undo that. Remember, I promised you I was going to show you a third way. So go to image adjustments, and this time we're going to go to exposure. Exposure is the hardest to understand, but I like to show it because I do every once in a while in class get a kid who is really into photography, and so they understand exposure and they use it with their cameras. So exposure basically has to do with how much light the camera is letting in the lens, right? So if I up my exposure, it's as if the camera lens is letting more light in. That's pretty much where I stop this explanation. You can play around the offset and the gamma correction, but that gets a high level of photo stuff. But go ahead, stop the video, and kind of play around with it now. Okay, edit undo all of your tonal changes. I'm going to let you pick which one you think is best. So either run image autotone or run one of the other three manual tonal options, your brightness, contrast, levels, or exposure. Okay? Did you pick autotone? I did too, because it actually works really good. All right. Now we're on to our next step. So we fixed the tonal range. That's the overall lightness and darkness. Now we're on step 6, which is to remove any color cast or color imbalance. This is where, again, you're going to have an auto option and a manual option. Now, auto tone usually most of the time does a really good job. I will be honest, auto color for Photoshop does not do as well. You really do need to know how to do the manual way just in case the auto doesn't work. So under image, again, you'll see it has auto color just like auto tone. Let's go ahead and stop the video and try that now. Okay, we're going to undo that. So notice how I went back in time. The photo is much bluer. Here's why color imbalance is a little bit hard for students, is because if you don't have the finished file, if you don't know what the end file looks like, you may not be able to identify what the color cast is. A lot of times kids can't see it. Like I would look at this right away and be like, whoa, it's kind of bluish and purple. Students wouldn't see that. The easiest way to figure out what the color imbalance is to zoom in really tightly on an area that should be white and kind of try to block everything else out and just look in that area. And now if I look really closely at these pixels, which should be white, I can tell they're like a really faint blue purple. Okay, that's how you can identify what is that color cast. Again, zoom in on something that should be white. All right, so now I know what color is imbalanced. I know it's a blue-violet. There's too much blue-violet. How do I manually create that balance? So if I go up to Image, Adjustments, I'm going to go to something called Color Balance. Okay, so your color balance is just what it's going to balance out those colors. The way you balance out the imbalance is to add the opposite. So if I have too much blue and too much violet, which I know is here, these are my two colors, I push those dials in the opposite direction. So I'm going to want to push my blue towards the yellow a little bit, and I'm going to want to push that magenta to the green a little bit. And again, I'm going to go before and after, before and after. So stop the video, open up Image Adjustments, Color Balance, and just give it a try. Okay, so now depending on whether or not you think you're going to use the color balance or auto color, either way, either with auto color or color balance, I want you to fix the color cast that you have there. All right, excellent. One last thing I'm going to do, just because I'm starting to think, I think my levels needs to go up just a little bit. And this is a good way to check. So once you've applied your level changes, if you reopen that histogram, your mountain range should be a little bit more leveled off. But I'm thinking, I think my lights need to be a little bit lighter. And this is just me tweaking. See, lots of little changes. Okay, I'm happier with it. All right, let's look at our slides. Woo, we're already through the first 5 there. So now we're talking about adjusting colors and tones in specific areas. So what that means is not the overall darkness and lightness, just in specific areas. So if I'm looking at my statue back here, I'm like, ooh, the shadows are kind of washed out, or the highlights aren't very bright. I can just in that area kind of tweak those, and we're going to use some tools to do that. So let's grab first of all, let's grab our zoom tool, and I want to zoom in on the statue a little bit. So I want to make the highlights that are on the statue a little bit lighter so that it sticks out. There's a little bit of pop, and I want to make the shadows just a little bit darker, so I've got more contrast in my statue. So this is the drawer we're going to be using for these specific adjustments. You've got the dodge tool, the burn tool, and the sponge tool. The dodge and the burn both have to do with your tone. They both have to do with tone. Dodge is lighten, burn is darken. All right? And then your sponge has to do with your color. Okay? So the first 2 are tone, the last one is color. We're going to start with our dodge tool. All 3 of these tools work like a brush that you just paint across. So you can pick a brush shape, you can decide how big it is. So in your options up at the top, you'll see here that you've got your size. You can make it as big or as small as you want. So I can make it really big, but I don't want to. We're going to make it somewhere around like size 20 or something like that. I can make it harder or softer depending on just my personal preference. We're going to leave it kind of down low. And then the last thing I want us to do before we talk about the range is look at your exposure. Exposure means how fast does this tool work. If I have cranked up to 100%, man, it's gonna really make changes happen really fast. If I take the exposure down, it's going to be much more subtle. And remember, I said in Photoshop, it's easy to make it look fake really fast. So I suggest your exposures are always like 20% or low for these 3 tools. You want to make it subtle. You can always push it more, but it's hard to pull that back a little bit. Okay, so think about like giving gas, right? So I'm going to take my exposure down to 15%. And then we need to tell this dodge tool, okay, what am I lightening? Am I lighting the highlights? Am I highlighting the midtones? Or am I highlighting the shadows? And I wanna increase the brightness of those highlights. So let's make sure it's set at highlights. So let's look at my options again. Brush this about 20, somewhere in the 20s. Range is set to highlights, and my exposure is set to 15. Stop the video and set that settings right now. All right, now that you've got your settings, now we're just going to come across and we're just going to brush across the highlights. And you'll notice, see how it makes it a little bit brighter? If it's making it too bright too fast, your exposure might still be too high. Undo that, go back through your history panel or Control-Z it until you go back and try it again. All right, so now that we have the highlights highlighted, we kind of brought that out now. Now let's talk about those shadows. I want to darken the shadows. I want to make it to have really, really strong contrast. So we're going to switch to our burn tool. Works just like the dodge tool. So I want to make sure I've got a brush that's about somewhere in the 20s. I want my exposure low, so I'm going to go back to 15 again. And this time, I want to make the shadows darker. Dodge tool is making it lighter. Burn tool is making it darker. I want to make my shadows darker. So I'm going to click on shadows, and I'm going to come across, and I'm going to brush. And it should make those shadowed areas, the darks, darker without really messing with the other colors. All right, stop the video and try that now. All right, now let's go ahead and move down to your tulips. So what we're going to do now is we're going to increase the brightness and the intensity of those colors. We're really going to make them pop here. And we're going to switch to the sponge tool. Sponge tool works just like Dodge, just like the burn tool. So we've got a brush size. We're going to take it down to about 20. We're going to leave the flow set at somewhere between 15 and 20%. And the mode for this, you have two options. I can go to desaturate or saturate. Saturate means it's going to make the colors way brighter. Desaturate means it's going to pull them out to the point where you can actually make it black and white or gray. We're going to set it to saturate. And then I'm going to come across one of my tulips and I'm just going to brush it. And you're going to see it's going to make it much, much brighter. All right, so stop the video and try that now. All right, just because I want to show you what the desaturate option does, I'm going to switch it, but I don't want you guys to do this. So it's desaturate takes the color out. So if I come over to my tulip, notice it's taking the color, it's starting to turn gray. All right, so I just want to show you what that is. All right, with some time, the next couple minutes here, go ahead and take your burn tool, your Dodge tool, and you can clean up your tulips, or even down here in your grass. If I want to make, I'm going to stick to my burn tool, I want to make my shadows and my grasses a little bit darker. I want to make them pop a little bit more. So again, these three tools, they're just for specific areas. They're great for like when you have a shadow that brushes across somebody's face that you need to remove, but the rest of the image is really good. Go ahead and stop the video and try that now. All right, so let's check our slides. So we've duplicated, we checked the resolution, we've cropped, we skipped number 4, we adjusted our tone, we removed the blue-purple color cast, and now we adjusted the colors and the tones in specific areas. Now we're on to our last option, which is to sharpen the focus. So I'm zooming out just to see where I'm at. So the very last step is to always run a filter. And there's 3 different filters that you will run in Photoshop. One is for sharpening your focus. Another one is for reducing something called noise, and you'll have a lesson on that. And then the third option is for softening things for when you're doing portrait work, and we'll have a lesson on that. What we're going to do is we're going to run the unsharp mask filter. And the unsharp mask filter just crisps everything up just a little bit. So it takes an image that might be a little blurry and just give it some crisper edges. Now, what it doesn't do is if you have an image that's really, really blurry, it can't fix that. So if you've ever seen in like CSI or other crime scene movies or whatever, where they take a photo and they enhance it and it's all pixelated and all of a sudden the computer just puts in all this detail, that's 100% fake. Can't do that. That does not happen. But you can make your contrast on your lines and stuff a little bit crisper, but just a little bit. And here's how we do that. We're going to go up to Filter. We're going to go to Sharpen, and we're going to go to the filter called the Unsharp Mask tool. Again, make sure you have your dialog preview option checked. And you can drag your slider. You really only just deal with the amount. If you go far to the right, notice how fake that looks really, really quickly. You want to really only increase it just a little bit, and I like to again hit the before after. You're just making it just a little bit. I wouldn't worry too much with radius or threshold. You're just dealing with your amount. When you feel like it's good, go ahead and click OK. All right, so I'm going to see how well I did. I'm going to see if mine looks anywhere near the end file. Well, I probably removed too much of a color cast. I probably didn't push it yellow enough. So if I wanted to fix that, I would go back to my color balances. And I could increase it if I wanted to. Or not. It's totally up to you. And then when you're happy with this, go ahead and close. That's it for the 8 steps. From here, we're going to go on to that step number 4. Our next video is going to pick back up on this one. It's going to go deeply into that one. And then you're going to have one last lesson that's going to go over a bunch of little things, kind of extra stuff that doesn't quite fit in this 8 steps, but still important. Good job. Hey everyone, welcome to